Okay, Evans, all yours.
Thanks so much. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining in person and online. My name is Evan Ponter. I'm a Salesforce application architect, independent consultant based in Baltimore, Maryland, here on the East Coast. And first time I logged into Salesforce was 2012. It's been over 10 years. I started as an accidental admin at a nonprofit and accidentally had admin rights and started tinkering with stuff, and then decided after about 6 months of doing projects there that I wanted to turn this into a full out Salesforce career. So I've bounced around between a few different Salesforce customers, both nonprofit and for profit. I dabbled into the consulting world in 2019 and took the plunge into full time consulting in April of 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm 3 years into running my own consulting firm. I support a handful of clients, both in the for profit and nonprofit worlds, based on the experience that I had at the time. Now, I believe you are seeing my screen at this point. Let me know if that's
Yes.
not true. And then reporting has come up in every project I've ever worked on, from my days at Salesforce customers and definitely through to the consulting days. Every project really has three main components to it. Is the data model accurate? Are we representing the real world in Salesforce? Can we automate things to make those our processes go faster and be less human involved? The third pillar is, can I visualize that data? And it's really a thing that is always left to the end of a project to start visualizing that data as the results. But really, it's something you kind of have to think about throughout the process and definitely upfront in order to make sure that we are always enabling ourselves to create those visualizations and create those reports. So today's session is all about how to simplify that process and give you some tips and tricks to working with standard operational reporting in Salesforce to really simplify the concepts and give you a foundation in order to build upon so that you can easily get those data visualizations back out of Salesforce that we have painstakingly set up that data model and that automation in order to support doing such thing. I have my contact information here if you want to reach out to me at any point. I have the chat open if you are online or you have a computer at the in-person meeting, you want to post a question. And if somebody wants to ask something throughout, I very much would enjoy stopping the spiel and ask your question, and we'll try to get it answered in due time here. So feel free to interrupt me. The most valuable thing out of a session like this is being able to have some dialogue. So feel free to ask away. So Salesforce reporting. Here's the typical experience. People are putting all their data in Salesforce and they want to build a report. So they jump right in and they're like, cool, I'm going to build a new report. And the very first thing you have to decide is, what report type are you going to use? Now, this is an org that I just spun up, but as you can see, there are dozens and dozens and maybe even hundreds of options here. There's a bunch of standard report types that come out of the box with Salesforce. We also have custom report types. They might have been from an installed package. They might have been something that you created because you were frustrated with the standard reports. Let's say we wanted to report on our accounts and we want to report on our opportunities, and we're not too sure which report type to use because even when I filter this down, I still have a lot of options. But I know I want to report on my accounts and my opportunities. So I choose this report type called accounts with opportunities. What could be the harm, right? I start my report and I clear some of these default filters so I'm looking at some data. I'm going to make sure I'm looking at all my data, right? All accounts created all time. Now, one of the first common frustrations people have is they're like, okay, this is great. I have some account fields here. I have some opportunity fields here. But what if I want another field from another object? What if I wanted the role of the opportunity owner or the account owner? And I don't see that field here. No results found. Can't filter on that field. I can't add it as a column to my report. How do I get more fields from other objects into the report builder? That is common frustration number one. Common frustration number two is how do I eliminate what seems to be duplicate results in my report? So as I'm looking through this, I see that the same account is showing up multiple times. This Bel Air Downtown Alliance shows up 3 times here. Last Call Entertainment shows up twice. Now, they appear to be duplicates, and it all really depends on the granularity that you want in the details of your report. And we're going to talk a lot more about that later, but that's one of the key things that I think we need to ground ourselves in so we clearly understand at what level in our data architecture hierarchy are we reporting. So we're going to talk about how to clear up those duplicate records that are showing up in your results. The third frustration people have with reports: why can't they see a record that they know exists in the database? I have cleared all of the filters. This is all accounts, all time. I'm looking for this Blackbeard's Grog Emporium account. I can search that account record. I can click on it and go to the record detail page. But no matter what I do, if I try to find that account in this report, I'll say the account name contains Grog. I'm looking for that Blackbeard's Grog. Oop, I don't see it. I got some other accounts, but I don't see that Blackbeard's Grog account. What gives? Why am I not able to find an account that I know exists when I'm filtering using a report type here? Now, the reason you can't see a record in your report, it comes down to 5 basic things. So we're going to step through all 5 of those here right now. Filters, 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 filters. When we're working with reporting, everything is a filter. We are filtering our data. And there are 5 kinds of filters you can be on the lookout for. And the good news is filters 2 through 5, you needed to filter based on a time frame, a field filter, a role or ownership, or use a cross filter, which we'll talk about later. We can adjust any of those filters at any point in our report building process. But the very first filter applied to our reporting results is the report type. It's critical in order to understand what our data set is going to be that we're working with as we begin to build our report. And what I want to emphasize here is you can have report types that are configured to have filters embedded within them. So the report type itself is narrowing down your data and perhaps further than you wanted it to. And what happens is if you're using a report type that has an embedded filter within it, you can't clear it at any point. That's why I can't find that Blackbeard's Grog Emporium account, because it's being filtered out at the report type level. We're going to talk a lot about how that works here. So early in my Salesforce administrator days, I was running into clients and my employers and coworkers who were running into all these problems. They were not able to easily get reports because of all these filters being applied at the report type level. Now, I didn't know that at the time. So in order to really figure that out, I had to do a lot of experiments. So I started with a custom report type because that's a world where I have control over things. You're not able to customize standard report types. So I found myself figuring out, like, what is the best way to set up a custom report type to be more flexible, make it clear how filters are being applied, and really give people access to all the fields that they want in the report building. So I started with something very simple. What you see here is an accounts is chosen as the primary object. And if I run a report based on this report type at this point, all of my detail rows are going to correspond to account records. And if I clear all the filters from my report, I would see all the account records that I have access to, according to the security model. Then I started experimenting. Well, what happens when I relate another object here? A couple things happen. Our Venn diagram gets a little more complicated here. We have records from 2 different objects in play. And I was like, well, what are these objects in this list? Why is it only some of the objects in Salesforce and not all of them? As it turns out, these objects are a list of the child objects from whatever you've chosen in the level above. So starting with accounts, if we go to relate a B object, it's going to be child objects of account, those related lists that you'll find on the account object. So I might choose something like partners. Now, as soon as I choose an object and I see this Venn diagram, no longer are my report results going to show me account records. I have fundamentally changed the detail rows in the report results of a report based on this custom report type. It's going to show me partner records that specify an account. And this is where the filter comes into play. We don't see all the records from the B object, not all the partner records. And we don't see all the records from the A object, from the accounts. We only see the partner records that specify an account. And that's really the best way to think of it is at the bottom of whatever hierarchy we set up is the records we're reporting on, and they have filters in play that relate back to the objects above it. Now we can relate another object and our Venn diagram gets more complicated and we are working down our data architecture hierarchy from accounts to its many partners to its many, let's say, orders. Now my report results in this configuration are going to be order records. Each of them specifies a partner and every one of those partners specifies an account. You must have a path back to a record from the primary object in order for a detail row to show up in your report results. So I would call this two filters are being applied to your order records in this report type configuration. Now we can relate one more object here, and maybe I'll choose order products. We've reached a limit. And again, we've fundamentally changed our report results. We're looking at order products. Each of them specifies order. Every order is related to a partner, and every partner is related to an account. 3 filters. We can't reference any other objects in this configuration. We have a mess of a Venn diagram, and everybody's frustrated, right? This type of report, custom report type, might facilitate 1 or 2 reports you're looking for. Because it has all these filters embedded within it, it's not that flexible. What I've realized through all these experimentations is there's a much simpler way to do this. Instead of trying to start at the top of our architecture hierarchy and work our way down, relating other objects, fundamentally changing our report type, our reporting results, we can start at the bottom. Start with the object you actually want to report on, and then you can bring in reference fields from parent objects. And it's insanely more flexible. So let me show you what that looks like. If I wanted to report on my opportunities, I can bring in any field from its parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and great-great-grandparents. I can traverse my data architecture hierarchy, starting from the object I want to work with, going through a lookup field or a master detail relationship up to a parent object. And from there, I can further traverse to its parents and grab any reference field I want, knowing all the while that I have access to all of the records from the object I'm reporting on at the bottom of the hierarchy here. What I call this is a deluxe report type. There's nothing you need to install. There is nothing you need to purchase. What I'm showing you here is a naming convention and really just breaking down the components of a custom report type and giving you a framework in order to create reports from any given object in your implementation. This works for all standard objects. This works for custom objects. This works for objects that you might have installed through a managed package. I'm going to show you here. It sounds like there's a question. Go ahead.
What is limit to go upstairs? How many levels?
Limits. Okay, so we can traverse 4 relationships, meaning you can have 5 objects in a hierarchy, like what you see here. You can include up to 1,000 fields that you're referencing in total on your custom report type layout. We'll get to that. And you can reference up to 60 objects. 60 unique objects can be included in your custom report type definition. So let me show you how easy it is to build one of these deluxe report types. I'm going to go back here into the setup menu. I'm going, is performance an issue? That always comes up too. So I've never had a performance issue from relating other reference objects in my report type. You're going to have way more performance issues if you're trying to report on too many records, I'll say, millions. And that could be at any level of this. But no, I've never had an issue from a deluxe report type configuration specifically. Probably something else going on if there's a performance issue. All I'm exploiting here, if you want to know the underlying details, is in SOQL, S-O-Q-L, there's dot notation in order to reference fields from a parent object. I'm just exploiting that in the custom report type configuration. So if you can do it in SOQL, you can do it with a deluxe report type. Okay, let's show you how to build one of these. I'm going to create a new custom report type. I want to report on my opportunity records, and I don't want any other filters applied. So my primary object here is opportunities. What I really like about what Salesforce did is this very first sentence. Specify what type of records, rows, will be the focus of reports generated by this report type. That is exactly what you should be thinking of when you set up one of these deluxe report types. Now, the example they give is garbage, so don't read the example. But keep in mind this first sentence, if you ever get lost, what type of records should be the focus of reports generated by this report type? This will be opportunities. Now, one of the many things I do to help distinguish this report type from all of the other noise in this organization, I put the name of the object, and then I put the word deluxe in parentheses. And that's going to come up later for encouraging people to use this report type. For the description, I like to list each detail row represents an opportunity record. I want to make it very clear what's going to show up in the report results before you ever begin building a report. So every detail row is going to be an opportunity record because that's what we chose for our primary object. I also include a list of all of the other parent objects that I plan to reference in this custom report type. That's going to help us with maintenance as we maintain a set of deluxe report types for our reporting needs. I'll store this in the opportunities category. We cannot customize this list as of this presentation, but there is an idea you can vote on in the idea exchange in order to do that. Down here in deployment, I'm going to mark this as deployed so that all users in this organization can see and access this custom report type. On to the next screen. This is really the hardest part. You are going to be very tempted when you get here to start relating other objects and making this Venn diagram very complicated and pulling in other fields. And I'm here to tell you, you need to resist the urge. We don't want this complicated Venn diagram. We want to be looking at this blue circle of tranquility. So calm, so peaceful, so easy to understand what's happening here. There are no other filters being applied. We want to report on our opportunity records as the primary object. All we need to do on this screen is click the save button. So I'll click save, and I really wish this next part was step 3 of the wizard. Salesforce talks about it in their documentation as if it's step 3, but people get to this screen and they think, oh, I've created my custom report type. I'm done. But if you scroll down to the bottom, there's this fields available for report section where you can edit the layout for your custom report type. And what that really means when you're editing the layout, you are able to customize the report builder experience as somebody is using this custom report type. And there's a lot to get into on this page. So by default, all of the fields from any objects that we've enforced in the custom report type configuration are automatically included in the layout for this custom report type. What I mean by layout is you have access to those fields for, you'll see them over here in the all fields section. You'll see them organized into folders. That's going to correspond to the sections of your report type layout. We'll talk a little bit about that. Those fields are available for grouping when they're part of the layout. Those fields are available as columns when they're part of the layout, and those fields are available as field filters when they are part of the layout. If you ever add a new field to your primary object, it may show up over here in the panel on the right side. A few releases ago, Salesforce came out with this checkbox as you are setting up a brand new field. There's auto added to custom report types. So for this example where I'm creating an opportunities deluxe custom report type, I ever add a new field to the opportunity object and I have this checkbox checked, which is the default, it will automatically be added to the end of the section there. That's not always true for fields that you are referencing from other objects. Question from Susan, are you able to edit the layout for existing report types? Yes, so as long as it's a custom report type, you can always go edit the layout for your custom report types at any point. Great question. So that's a little bit about how to get fields from your primary object into the report type. But what about reference fields? Fields from parent objects, grandparent objects, so on and so forth. Working our way up through that data architecture hierarchy that I was showing here. Well, over here on the right, there's this little field, this little hyperlink called add fields related via lookup. Doesn't look that important, right? About size 10 font, kind of buried here, smudged in with all this other stuff. This should be 100 times bigger and have fireworks. This is where all of the magic happens on this edit custom report type layout page. Add fields via lookup will let you traverse any relationship on the object that you've selected. For this example, we only have opportunities enforced on our custom report type. So when you click add fields related via lookup, you're looking at a list of all the relationship fields that are defined on your opportunity object, your primary object. So if I want to get more information about the account, I can traverse that account relationship by clicking account name here. And I have access to any account field. I could select all of them if I wanted to. Now, I'd like to pause here and say that there is that 1,000 field limitation to your custom report type layouts. So if you are a little bit choosy as you're bringing in fields from objects, we can stay well within that 1,000 field allocation. I know some implementations have hundreds of fields on their standard objects like opportunity or account or contact. So if you click select all on a few of those objects, you're quickly going to burn through your 1,000 field limitation. Take a second and make sure you're only selecting fields that are being utilized in your implementation that have data in them and would be useful to report on. So if I'm not using shipping address, don't waste 10 or 12 seats by selecting those fields. Deselect those. All this standard SLA stuff, we're not using that in our implementation. Don't burn those seats on useless fields. So be choosy and only choose fields that are going to be useful to you. I can click OK in order to add those to the layout. You'll notice they show up in the default section here with a magnifying glass icon. And that lets you know that this is a reference field. It came from some other object that is not our primary object. If you hover over those reference fields, at the bottom, it'll show you a lookup path on how you access this field in your custom report type. Very useful in order to figure out why you're seeing data a certain way, especially if you have multiple ways to get to the same object, taking different paths. Very handy to know about. Now, I like to organize my custom report type layouts into sections. Again, those sections will correspond to folders that you'll see here in the fields panel. They also show up as you're scrolling through your filters as headers, so you know how those, where those fields are from. Now, I like to create at least one new section for every unique object that I'm referencing. You can do more. Some people like to organize their custom report type layout the same way that they've organized their page layout. So if you have a lot of fields and you want to make it very clear for people who are used to looking at record detail pages, where those fields are coming from, you can recreate that here for the report builder experience. So I'm going to create a section for accounts, and I'm going to highlight all of those account fields. You can click on one and hold the Shift key and select a whole block of fields at the same time. You can also use Control on a PC or the Command key on a Mac to select multiple or select one field at a time. Once you have everything highlighted in blue, you can now drag around that entire block of fields. So I'm going to put that down here into the account section. Now let's go back here to the add fields related via lookup. And I want to traverse a bunch of relationships just to show you what's possible here. So I can go through any of these opportunity relationships. Maybe I'll go up to the account, and you'll notice that all of the relationship fields on the account also have this view related fields option here. That lets you go to the next level, essentially. I can start with opportunities, go up to its account, then I can go to the parent account for that account. Then I could traverse up to the account owner. Then maybe I could traverse up to the manager for that account owner. I now have 5 objects in a hierarchy here before I reach this limit. It says maximum lookup limit reached. But I could select all of the fields from the user object at this point, and I'll have all that information about the parent accounts, owners, manager. 4 relationships away, I can select all the fields. I can deselect things I know we're not using, all this stay in touch stuff. And I'll go ahead and add those fields to the layout. Again, I'll create a new section for that. So this is going to be parent account, owners, managers. I can select all those fields and drag them into that new section. Now the fun doesn't stop there. So you can keep coming back to add fields related via lookup, traverse other relationships. Maybe if you want more information about the price book, you could include that. If you wanted to get more information about the contract, you could spiderweb that way and bring in those fields. Again, you can take any path you want as long as you're working your way up through your data architecture hierarchy. You are starting with an object and you are traversing its relationship fields to its parent. So again, you can go from a record to its parent, to its grandparent, to its great-grandparent, to its great-great-grandparent, working your way up. But you can do that until you reference up to 60 unique objects. That is 60. I have never come close to referencing 60 objects. I have done dozens probably, and I've never had a performance issue with that. Again, we're just exploiting the dot notation capabilities of SOQL. So once I have all the fields that I want to include, I'll also want to get some of those role fields I was looking for earlier. So let's go back here and grab that from the opportunity owner. Again, I could traverse that role relationship and get some of those details. So they have like a display name, a developer name, forecast manager. There's a bunch of cool stuff you have access to. I'll make a new section for my opportunity owner role. Okay. Just this, move that down. A couple other cool things you can do from this page. Here's that section of fields where I maxed out the traversals. I went up 4 levels. If I double click on any one of these fields, you get 2 options. I'll zoom in so you can see this. So the first option that pops up in this modal window is called the display as value. Again, all I did to get here was double click on a field. There's also an edit properties button that shows up at the bottom. So if you click on a field and click edit properties, it will also open up that same modal window. Now this display as value by default has a really long like breadcrumb navigation style naming convention. If you were to group your data by this field, the label on that grouping would be about a mile long, probably take up way more room than it needs to. I also find it's just super redundant throughout your report. Your column header labels are really long and things get really spread out. So one of the things you can do is you can change this display as value. You can shorten it up to something that is still meaningful but takes up way less room. Maybe a parent account owner's manager. Are they active or not? Maybe that's all we need for our label here. Other thing you can do is you can completely relabel this field. So this works like an alias in SOQL. It doesn't change the field label on any of your detail pages. It doesn't change its API name. It just changes how this field displays in this custom report type. So you have a lot of flexibility and granularity here to have fields be labeled a specific way just for reporting purposes. It's a great thing to know about if you're doing a very low-level integration where somebody needs to export a CSV from Salesforce and upload it to some other system, and you want to go ahead and fix those column headers to match whatever that external system is expecting. You can just change the display values here for a custom report type and make that very easy. The other option you have for each field is called checked by default. That is a terrible name for what this thing does. This should really be called default columns in brand new reports based on this custom report type. When you check off this box, this field will automatically show up as a column in a brand new report when you set one up from this custom report type. Now, if you have that checked, you'll see a check mark icon here in your custom report type layout. If we noticed when I set up this report, it had two columns by default, account name and opportunity name. Some people like to have a starting place for themselves and users in their organization so they're not staring at a blank screen. You can set up a bunch of default columns to give them some data they're probably interested in anyways. On the flip side, some people are really annoyed that every time they create a brand new report, they come here to the columns and they say, remove all columns. I wish I could start with a blank slate every time. Well, now you can. So if you go to your custom report type, find all those pesky fields that have that check mark icon, double click on them, and go ahead and uncheck that checked by default option. You will now start with a blank slate whenever you create a brand new report. Last thing I'll tell you about on this page, there is a default time frame filter on every report. It has a range, and people really would love to customize the value that gets set here. I can't default the range value, but what I can tell you is the date field that gets selected by default is controlled by your custom report type layout. Turns out, this just picks the very first date or date time field that shows up in your report type layout. This works top to bottom, left to right, as if you're reading. So if I wanted a different date or date time field to be the default time frame filter, I just need to take it and drag it to a position higher than any other date or date time field. So I'll use created date instead of the opportunity close date. And we'll see how that has an impact when I set up a brand new report. Now you can spend hours tweaking this custom report type, continuing to add new fields related via lookup. You can double click and customize those display names, setting up your default columns. So I encourage people to click save early and often so that you don't lose an afternoon of work as you're making these adjustments. They have a running tally here at the top on how many fields you're including. If you go above 1,000, it's not going to stop you, but you won't be able to click save. It'll tell you, hey, you have to reduce the number of fields below 1,000 before you can save. Keep an eye on that as you're adding new reference fields to your report type. So I will click save on this, and let's go build a report from this report type. I want to show you a couple things along the way. I'm going to create a new report here. And we're back to this report type selection screen. Now this is getting more into the experience of things and helping you roll this out. There's this new interface that came out a few releases ago, and it has a lot of great things and a lot of not so great things. So by default, the category is always pre-selected to recently used. It's kind of like when you load up a new tab and your default view is like recently viewed records, but if you've never looked at a record in that object, then everything shows up blank and all your brand new users complain that they can't see anything in Salesforce. This is another place where that happens, so make sure you're clicking on the proper category. Probably want it to be all most of the time so that you can just go search for any report type. Now, our beautiful deluxe report type is buried somewhere in this list. I could filter down to all my deluxe report types by typing in the word deluxe. So this is the first part where that naming convention really helps to distinguish that custom report type. You can click on these report types and see some details about it. So here's my description that I put in for that Opportunities Deluxe report type. I have not created any reports yet. Nobody else has created any reports. And it tells me the objects that are enforced in this custom report type. So that's handy information. But over here, this Fields tab tells me there's 232 fields, and I can go ahead and double check to make sure that things like the role that I wanted in my report are included in that report type before I even begin. So that's a really handy way to just double check things and save yourself some time. The last thing I want to point out is underneath this Action Overflow drop-down menu, there's this option to hide report types. This was always possible. You could do this in Classic. You could do it in Lightning now. I find it weird that this is not in the setup menu. I'm on the select a report type screen as I'm creating a new report. But if you have the manage custom report types permission, you will see this option to hide report types. I get two questions at this point. Number one, is that an organization-wide setting? The answer is yes. You cannot hide report types based on profile or permission set. So a report type is either visible or it's hidden across your entire organization. Number two, if I hide a report type, is that deleting it or can I get it back? You can get it back. So let's say I want to clean up my opportunity report types. I want to basically come in here and get rid of all those confusing report types. It's ones that have the word with in them. There are a lot of the standard report types will say like opportunities with contact roles. You know, is that an opportunities report? Is that a contact roles report? Don't really know. It's a standard report type, so I can't customize it. My recommendation, come in here and hide it. I'll tell you, opportunities with contact roles is hidden. If I ever want to get that back, if I scroll down to the bottom of the category panel on the left, there's a category called hidden report types. Here is your graveyard of report types, and you can bring any of them back to life by clicking on it, and in this drop-down menu, you can say show report type. The other thing I'll tell you, go ahead, Kevin. Yeah.
If you hide report type and you have reports that are running and somebody had bookmarked reports,
yes,
will you be able to run them?
Yes. So if you have existing reports, when you hide the report type, it has no impact on that report being able to run. So it will still run as normal. People who have it bookmarked can still go to it, run it. There's no problem there. All this does is change the options that people see when they are looking for a report type for a brand new report. One of the things that has come up is somebody's taken the time to hide all the report types, and they still find that new reports are being created with report types that they've hidden. Probably what's happening is some savvy user found an old report that they bookmarked or otherwise have access to, and they clicked Save As in order to create a new report. Now that's going to use the report type set up for that report. So it's not really totally preventing people from using those older report types that are now hidden, but it does encourage people as they create fresh reports to only use the ones that you have verified, that you have control over. You can tweak that experience for them, and that you've sort of blessed as report types that people should be using. Thank you, Susan. Yes, hiding report types is a very good way to direct users who get themselves confused and need to be untangled. That's absolutely correct. So what I want to get to here is you can really narrow down your choices for people so that they only see things you want them to be using. So if I have some of these other confusing report types, I can go ahead and hide them. For special objects like opportunity, you probably want to keep your standard report type. The nice thing about that one is it's automatically maintained for you. So as you add new fields, all of your fields on opportunity always show up in your opportunities standard report type. So I don't mind that one. You'll keep your opportunities deluxe custom report type available so that you encourage people to use that one for any of their tailored needs where they need to reference additional fields. But you'll also have some special report types like opportunity trends, opportunity history, opportunity field history. They're standard report types, and I keep them around only because you can't recreate them using custom report types. So for those special standard report types, I'll keep those around. But for the most part, if you have an organization and you have, 24 objects in play in your implementation, you could really set up a set of deluxe report types, one for each object that you want to be the detail rows in reports, and really direct people to just use deluxe report types as their default. It's good for probably 98% of all reporting use cases. You just need to run reports on an object and reference fields from parents. It's a great starting place to get people to feel confident in their reporting abilities and really make the connection between their data structure and what they're visualizing in a report and really bring that together. One of the other things you can do is you can set up a deluxe custom report type on the reports object. And that gives you access to things like the report type being used for all of your reports, as well as the folder. So if you set up one of these reports, you can analyze your existing reports to figure out, okay, what are all the different report types being used? What folders are they in? And start to whittle away at converting them over to using your deluxe report types, if you so choose to do so. So just wanted to point that out, set up a deluxe report type on the reports object, and you can do that analysis here. Last thing I'll point out as far as maintenance is when you are adding new fields to your objects and you want to figure out which deluxe report type should they show up in. Because of our naming convention, you can set up a list view on the deluxe report type, custom report types in the setup menu here. And if you include the description as a column and you're good about indicating which reference fields you're including, I could just do a quick search here for the word account and figure out where am I referencing account fields across all of my deluxe report types. And I would say this list of 24 report types, one for each object in use in your implementation, is far easier to manage than just the Wild West chaos of people guessing and checking, creating reports off of report types they don't quite understand or are not a good fit for the job because they have those embedded filters within them, and really getting themselves twisted into a knot because they don't trust Salesforce anymore because they can't visualize the data that they know is in the system. So talked a lot about getting fields into the report builder. Talked a little bit about those filters being applied at the report type level, preventing you from seeing things like accounts that don't have any opportunities if your custom report type is set up for accounts with opportunities. So that's why I couldn't see that Blackbeard's account earlier. The other thing people were frustrated with is the duplicates. So I really want to emphasize how we solve for that problem. We need to ground people with an understanding when you're creating a report, you need to choose the granularity you want to see for these detail rows. So if I want a report where there are no duplicate accounts, I have two options. I can either report on the account records themselves. So I would choose accounts deluxe for my report type. That's going to give me access to all of my account records, and each detail row represents an account record. That is one option to do that. The other way you might be analyzing your data is you want a summary of some detail records at the account level. So maybe that's a summary of opportunities, but you want to summarize them for each account. In that case, your detail rows should be an opportunity record, and you're going to group your data by something like the account name or the account ID so that you can get that aggregate summary for each of your account records. So really the key to eliminating duplicates is understand the granularity of your detail records, your detail rows of your report results, and make sure you're choosing a report type that's reporting at the right level of granularity in your data architecture hierarchy. Following all these steps, you can get to a world where people have a trusted set of deluxe report types. You've been able to provide a consistent experience for them, giving them access to all the fields that they need, and you can eliminate all that wasted time of people guessing and checking on which report type to use for a given situation. I hope this has been helpful. I'll open it up a few minutes here for questions if you have any questions.
So if you have questions, you have to come up here and ask your questions because I don't have a microphone. But I'll start with my first question. How much, first of all, thank you so much. I've been doing Salesforce for around 17 years, and I've used report types all over the years. I've never, ever considered the way you did it. And that is amazing. Yeah. How many months should you sort of plan to set this all up? Like, this must take a lot of time and thought.
Great question. Initial implementations, it's sort of something I'm thinking about as I'm designing the data model. And once you get to a place where you've kind of stopped creating custom fields, I would spend an afternoon setting up the deluxe report types for each of the objects that implementation is going to be using. So that's a, particular situation. Because I'm a consultant and I find myself in that scenario, it takes me an afternoon really just to get at least something in place. It doesn't have to be completely done. The beautiful thing about custom report types is you can edit them at any point. So when I get phase 2 or phase 3 requirements and I come back and build new objects and add new fields, I just go through and update those custom report types to keep them up to date. Now, if you are in-house, you're working for a Salesforce customer and you have years of implementation and you're trying to transition over to this, it's a much different story. I would start with a deluxe report type on the reports object just to sort of analyze and prioritize what do you want to tackle, and you can slowly take steps to get there. One of the ways to do that is sort of go object by object. What is your most used object that is critical? Build out your deluxe report type for that object, then go hide all the report types related to that object that you don't want people using anymore. And you can start to take steps in the direction object by object or report by report, whatever makes sense for how much time you have, your team size, and the complexity of your implementation. But that could be a multi-month process, but really just like setting up one new custom report type at a time.
Evan, I have a comment/question.
Yeah.
So I love your approach because I'm a big believer in making it so setting up Salesforce to me is like selling your house. So remove half the furniture because people get confused very easily. And the easiest thing is for them to just see what they need. So I love your level of control freakiness, which matches mine, I would say. I think it's good for an admin to be a control freak. So what I did notice was that people get confused, even though it says contacts with accounts, they do get confused because they don't realize it means only the ones with accounts. So I think that's a perfect place. And a few of the default report types are like that.
Yes.
They actually have for, you have to actually set up to get what people think they're getting when they say, I want an account report or whatever it is. You actually do have to do a custom one because the default is filtered, I noticed.
Right. Yeah, that is a really good point. Like for context, there is no standard report type that would just give you all context. The closest is accounts and contacts, but it's only going to show you contacts related to an account. Part of that is because contacts that don't have an account are private contacts. But if you're a system admin, still, you can't see those unless you set up a custom report type. The other
Exactly.
thing
We don't allow
yeah,
it, but our old data already had that.
right.
So it was, you
Yeah,
know, the mess that's already there, and you have to see it to fix it.
exactly.
Anyway, thanks so much. This was really
Yeah,
useful.
absolutely. Thanks for joining. The other thing that happens sometimes with those standard report types is Salesforce is trying to be too fancy, in my opinion, and they will change the results based on the columns that you're including, which can really make it hard to debug what you're actually getting. So I always default back to my trusted set of deluxe report types because it doesn't have that behavior. You will always get the same detail rows corresponding to whatever records you're reporting on in your deluxe report type, regardless of what columns you're including.
Any other questions?
Just one more question. Do you have similar presentation for filtering on reports, like cross object filtering and other options and joint reports? You're doing this so well. We would like to use you again.
Exactly what I thought Nash was going with this.
Yeah,
You're welcome
I have
to present again.
Oh, absolutely. So there's two topics I normally do as follow-up for this. One of them is a crash course in cross filters. It can be 30 minutes, 45 minutes of just showing you all the wonderful capabilities of cross filters. And I do get a little more complex with the custom report type configurations. I have another presentation that's best suited as step 3, where we talk about some really complex custom report type configurations and what that enables you to do. But yeah, I'm happy to come back and do either one of those or both.
Evan, just hold that thought because
Okay.
you might be able to help me get out of a jam. Larry, you just joined.
Hey, this is hey, Kevin.
Are you happen to be with Own Backup?
Yeah, I used Own Backup before. Yeah.
Oh, but you're not with Own Backup.
No.
Okay. So Evan, I know this is at last minute. Either I struggle trying to give a press. Richard Rose has not showed up, and he's supposed to be on at 1 o'clock. So either I try to present a presentation about the seating tool, or if you have something already prepared and you don't mind giving another presentation, that would get me out of a big jam.
Sure. Okay.
You don't mind?
Yeah, that's fine. Let's do it.
Okay. Is anybody against this? Okay. Listen, let me stop the recording and then I'll start again, and then I'll give you just a minute. If you guys want to just grab some, there's some cookies on the table. There's lots of food. And Evan, you're a godsend.
Absolutely.
You can have break too, Take 5 minutes, have a coffee. So.
Okay, let me stop this recording first of all.